everybody. Welcome to SI Now. It is Wednesday, March 15th, and I'm Maggie Gray.
Jordan Schultz, thanks for having me, Maggie.
Oh my gosh, thank you for being here. And unlike the teammates from the University of New Orleans, we're not going to choke each other today. This is all love happening here. We're going to survive and advance to the next round. Okay, we know who's already into the main bracket of 64, but Jordan, is your bracket filled out yet?
It is totally filled out,
okay.
But I'm going to be revisiting because that's the only way I know how to do it.
Revisiting. I fill mine out in the first 5 seconds. It comes on Selection Sunday. I fill them out. Boom, I'm done. I don't go back to it. And no disrespect to the first four, but for most fans, the NCAA tournament really begins in earnest on Thursday. The very first game on that schedule, a 12-5 matchup between Notre Dame and the Princeton Tigers. And Tigers head coach Mitch Henderson joins us now. All right, Coach, is everyone you know now obligated to pick you as their champion?
Well, I wouldn't hold it against them if they did. Notre Dame's a good team, but we're getting a lot of support, and I'm thankful for that because it's fun. It's fun to represent the tournament, being the first game out. Our guys are really fired up about it.
Coach, this has been a storybook season, obviously, but the conference made you work extra hard. Since the 1950s, the winner of the Ivy regular season automatically got a bid into the tournament. Obviously, this year, the conference added a postseason tournament. Obviously, you go undefeated, go figure. It worked out because you won the Ivy tournament, but how different has the tournament, in addition to the regular season, made your job as a coach?
Well, we were trying it on for size for the first time, so I don't think we really knew exactly what to expect. And heading into the tournament last weekend, we were saying let's keep things the same. Let's take it, just like we have. Let's be in the moment. Let's be present. We went down to the Palestra and played Penn on Saturday and almost walked out of there. And 2 hours later and went home. We didn't lead until overtime. So I think we grew while we were in the tournament, so it was beneficial, but I have more gray hairs, as you can see.
Yeah, you kept it interesting for all of us watching too, Coach, so I guess we appreciate that. You are playing 12:15 p.m. Thursday. You have the Conference Player of the Year. You have the Defensive Player of the Year in the Ivy. You have a 19-game winning streak. I mean, how confident do you deserve to be that you can beat Notre Dame?
Well, I'm glad you point those things out. We feel really good. And the really fun part about the tournament is neutral court. And, you sort of you want a little bit of the March magic, right? Like you're trying to get your guys believing that they can do it. But this group, as you mentioned, is a veteran group. We have Spencer Weiss, Steve Cook, both first-team All-Ivy guys. And then you mentioned Miles Stevens, who, really kind of put us on his back here in the last couple of weeks. And we've got a great group. They believe in themselves. We're actually headed over to the arena today for the first time to kind of get a feel for it. And we know Notre Dame is a really tough matchup, but the guys are up for it, and they know that we're going to prepare them to win.
Coach, you went to Princeton. Obviously, you helped lead the Tigers to 2 notable tournament wins. And UCLA, that was the big one. They were the defending national champs. You beat them as a 13 in 96. And then, obviously, you were the 5 in 1998 when you beat UNLV. So now you're the 12. So for you, when you think about that, Notre Dame being the 5, how much pressure is on the 5 considering the history of that 12-5 first-round upset?
Well, I think it depends on who's on the team. That team that I played on when we were the 5, we had, as you mentioned, we won the league twice. We had played, that was our 3rd tournament. This Notre Dame team is coming off 2 Elite 8 appearances.
Only team in the country. Yeah.
I don't think this group that we're going to see on Thursday is the least bit phased by the moment or this Notre Dame team. So I think pressure comes from within, and it happens in the moment, and that's what I'm hopeful for, that some of the Princeton fans that are going to be showing up tomorrow can create some noise and make it interesting.
Well, yeah, if they can brave the snow, which we know that you also got caught in. You play a first-round game in Buffalo, and that's what tends to happen in March. Of course, as Jordan mentioned, you went to Princeton, you got your degree in economics, and then worked in Silicon Valley before you got into coaching. Is there anything you've taken from that world, the Silicon Valley world, and applied it to Princeton basketball?
Well, that was a long time ago. My friends would be laughing about me. Not really. I mean, I was there in '99, and I was I was young. I mean, my head was still in the game of basketball. I think what I learned is I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to coach, be around the game. And I was fortunate Bill Carmody, who was my coach here at Princeton when I was a player, got the Northwestern job, and he asked me to come be an assistant. And I was very thrilled about that.
You know, Coach, I believe you, but I have to imagine when some of these Silicon Valley IPOs get released, maybe you think
Maggie,
to yourself, I should have stuck with it.
Can't go there.
You know, I would say yes. I would say you could take this a lot of different ways, but I think coaching challenges you in so many ways. I mean, I can't imagine maybe you know, with the right job you can do all the different things that we have to do, but you know, the X's and O's is just one small part of it, and that's kind of what you think you're getting into. It's the relationships. It's these kind of conversations. I like the you know, sort of the breadth of it and all the different kind of hats you have to wear. I can't really imagine doing anything else.
Well, it's fantastic. Clearly, you chose wisely as your team is on a 19-game win streak. You're going to take on Notre Dame in this 12-5 matchup. Coach, we really appreciate your time. Mitch Henderson from Princeton, wishing you the best of luck.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, really crazy journey for them to Buffalo. Wild looking at it on social media.
To have the pressure of winning a regular season Ivy title, and then the first year, now you got to go out and win it. They almost got beat. And the Palestra was crazy. That's Penn's home floor. That could have been really bad.
Well, they had to be thinking to themselves, what more do we have to do? We just ran the table in the Ivy
But to get a 12 for an Ivy is really high. That is
really
a respect from the committee.
Absolutely, and we'll see, obviously, the history of the 12-5 upset, see if they can get a little magic. Jordan, what do Wally Zerbiak, Steph Curry, and Trey Burke all have in common? Well, they all use the NCAA tournament to improve their draft stock. So who has the most to gain in the big dance, in your opinion?
I'm going to go with Grayson Allen. And I thought about this for a few minutes, and I struggled with it. But then you think about, he was a Wooden Award guy. People thought he had a legitimate shot to be the player of the year this year as his junior year after coming off last year where he was terrific. And he's been really bad. And I know he's had the on-the-court issues. Obviously, he was suspended. But you think about his resurgence of late. Played really well in the ACC tournament. I saw him in Brooklyn. He looked like he was comfortable. My only thing with Grayson Allen right now is he comfortable coming off the bench sometimes? Because late in games, he's actually sitting. So I wonder how much, you know, the confidence factor he'll have. I also wonder with Duke how much they'll rely on him, because really Kennard and Jason Tatum have become their go-to guys. So I think he has a lot to gain, and I would even say he has a lot to lose as well, because if he plays poorly, there's really no doubt in my mind he'll come back for his senior year.
Mine is Lonzo Ball, and here's why. I think that he is really the only other person playing in this tournament that has a shot to get to the #1 overall pick in the NBA draft. And listen, I don't have to tell you about LaVar. He can clearly speak for himself. Yeah. But listen, if Lonzo ends up being a one and done in this tournament, if they go out early, unfortunately, a lot of what LaVar had to say is going to come back to hurt Lonzo, and I think it might hurt in the eyes of the NBA scouts as well. We're all wondering how this perceived pressure, at least on the outside, it looks like LaVar is putting pressure on his son. We're all waiting to see how that may impact him. If he leads UCLA to the Final Four, to the championship game, to a title, I think scouts might say, wow, this is a mentally tough person who we don't have to worry about what Pops has to say, and we can feel comfortable taking him #1 overall. Of course, Markelle Fultz is expected to be the top pick in the draft, although you'll notice the Washington Huskies did not make the tournament, which means for the second straight year, the projected top pick is watching from home. On Monday, I asked Hall of Famer Dick Vitale whether this should impact Fultz in the eyes of the NBA.
Well, you know, you like to have players that have a winner's mentality, and you start to question, how could a kid be a #1 potential player coming into the NBA and he can't carry his team to the fact of even being a little better than mediocre?
All right, that was Dickie V. Jordan, do you agree with the legendary broadcaster?
Oh, I do to an extent. You know, last year, a lot of people gave Ben Simmons a lot of heat. They won 19 games, and he had a couple pros around him. Tim Quarterman was there. I do look at Markelle Fultz. They were atrocious this year in the Pac-12, but I don't know how much more he could have done. So I think, yes, I do agree that it should hurt him a little bit, but you also look at the talent around him. He doesn't have any other pros on the team, and I thought, you know, for most of the year he was top 5 in the country in scoring. He shot a good percentage, and everybody you talk to around that program says he's a good kid. So I do like him a lot. but I do have to put a little bit of damage to him for not making the tournament.
You know, I always hold this against guys who are supposed to be top picks. The top. I mean, I'm not going to say Damian Lillard because he never got there with Weber State, you know, a one bid conference. I'm not going to kill guys like that. But I think it does hurt the draft stock. I think it happened to Klay Thompson. He never made a tournament from Washington State. I think it hurt Paul Millsap. Louisiana Tech never made the tournament. Nerlens Noel, I think, had a shot to be the number one pick. That Kentucky team just could not get it together, and I think it hurt him. I mean, not that much. He still was a top 10.
Yeah.
But I do think that it deserves to be said, especially when you come from a Power 5 conference where, like Dick Vitale was illustrating there, you really have to be 500. I mean, you don't have to, you know, carry your team to an undefeated conference record, but you got to win a couple games.
They were single-digit wins. They were as bad. I think they were like the third lowest rated RPI for a major 5 conference. So I mean, there's definitely some heat there. Obviously, Dennis Smith doesn't get in from North Carolina State. Both those guys, McDonald's All-American point guards. So yeah, there is some issues, but also the talent level is robust with a guy like Fultz, 6'4", to do the things he does.
Something tells me he's going to be able to hang on to that pick, although not if Ball goes far into the tournament. We'll have to see.
The attention surrounding LaVar Ball is approaching its fever pitch. LaVar Ball was trending on Twitter Tuesday night. Lonzo's dad has never been shy. We know that. And we have the top 10 things you didn't know LaVar Ball said. Number 10, hashtag LaVar Ball says Steve Jobs stole his iPhone idea.
Number 9, he's the father of dragons. Ooh, Game of Thrones coming back soon. Can't wait.
Number 8, he could have created the world in 5 days.
He only needs 5 days. Number 7, you know, he gave Rachel Maddow Trump's tax returns.
Wow, okay. Number 6, the roof is actually the ceiling, MJ.
Little did we know. Number 5, he rocks a bathing suit better than Kate Upton. That's just a flat out lie.
That's a lie. Number 4, he convinced Kyrie Irving the earth is round.
Not an easy job. Number 3, he's all of Jay-Z's 99 Problems.
Number 2, he knew it was moonlight the entire time.
Hold on. Nobody else knew. He knew. And the number 1 thing you didn't know that hashtag LaVar Ball says, that Lonzo would go number 1 overall in the NFL draft. Boom, there you go.
Moving to the NFL, we're into the second week of free agency, and my man Albert Breer of Monday Morning Quarterback joins us now. Albert, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Jordan?
Great, thanks. Albert, obviously Eddie Lacy signs a 1-year deal with the Seahawks. What impact does that now have on the market for Adrian Peterson and Jamal Charles, who is visiting with Seattle today?
Well, it certainly gives the Seahawks some leverage and takes some of the money that Adrian Peterson or Jamal Charles would want off the table. But Jamal Charles and Adrian Peterson are in different situations. I think for Jamal Charles, there's a real reason you can look at him and say to yourself, he can reinvent himself as a back. The reason why, he's a versatile player. He's a guy who can play for you on third down. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And so he's got a real chance to kind of give second life to his career. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for Adrian Peterson. He's relied way more on his physical ability, that overwhelming physical ability over the course of his career. And so now I think most teams look at him and say, all right, maybe we can turn him into a closer, a guy who can contribute on first and second down, but he lacks the versatility that somebody like Charles does. And I'll tell you this too, Jordan, you know, just from a global standpoint, all of these guys are affected by what's expected to be a historically deep group of running backs coming out in the draft. At the top, it's guys like Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. But beyond just those guys, there's depth too. There are a lot of teams out there that are saying to themselves, why would we go and spend $4, $5, $6 million on a veteran back when we can find someone in the third or fourth round of this year's draft?
And what a difference a couple years makes when it was just, 5 years ago that we were wondering why a team would ever take a running back in the first round. Now we're expecting at least 3 in this year's upcoming draft. Albert, turning to the Patriots, right in your backyard up in New England. They were busy, of course, the first few days of free agency. They signed Cooks, Dwayne Allen, Rex Burkhead also joining the team, but there's still work to be done on the defense. We believe that Super Bowl hero Malcolm Butler is as good as gone to New Orleans. What about Dante Hightower, though? What's the likelihood that he re-signs with the Pats?
But I can just tell you, Maggie, the teams that are in the running for Dante Hightower have really felt from the start like he is going to wind up going back to New England. I think New England's put the best financial package in front of him. And so now it comes down to really a matter of pride. You know, he's a 270-pound linebacker who doesn't have much of a market in an age where teams are looking for 225, 230-pound linebackers who can really run. Hightower can do a lot of things, but he doesn't fit into a lot of different defensive schemes. And so, you know, the Patriots offered him $10 million per year before this season. Their offer hasn't come up much since then. He obviously incurred a full season of injury risk and decided to go back and bet on himself. And a lot of times in these cases, it comes down to a matter of pride. Are you okay with going back to the team and saying, okay, I'm willing to accept the terms of a deal that I actually turned down 7 months ago and incurred all of that injury risk? And so the question now becomes, is pride a factor here? Is there that element there? And this happened in the cases with the Patriots of Adam Vinatieri and Wes Welker, where those guys were sick of kind of being treated like a commodity by a team that they've given so much to. Does that become a factor here in Dante Hightower's decision-making? That's a question only he can answer. But I think most people who've been involved in this over the last week expect that he'll wind up back in New England on a deal that looks a lot like the one they offered to him 7 months ago.
Albert, let's shift from one team that's used to winning to another team that's used to a lot of drama. Washington, we go to the area of Bruce Allen and Daniel Snyder. I just want to ask you, bottom line, what is next in this obviously a never-ending saga?
Well, sure, Jordan. I can tell you they had a free agent board set by Scott McCloughan. The draft board was set by Scott McCloughan. And if you look at the moves that they've made over the course of the first few days of free agency, they've really followed the free agent board and the free agent plan that Scott McCloughan had set out. DJ Swearinger was very high on Scott McCloughan's board. A couple of defensive linemen that the Redskins signed were guys that Scott McCloughan had planned on pursuing. And they're following the overall plan, which was we're okay on the edges of the defense. We want to build up the middle with defensive linemen and safeties. So you can see where they're following what the plan that Scott McCloughan set out for them. You know, some things changed between now and the draft, but the draft board was actually set. So a lot of that is in place. The big question for the franchise becomes what happens after the draft, because that's when you're out from underneath Scott McCloughan's his evaluations. And so that's when you've got to start to think, okay, who's going to be the decision maker here? How are we going to set up the scouting staff? McCloughan was such a huge presence in that organization over the last 2 years, did such a good job of building up the middle and the bottom of the roster and setting the stage for the team to post consecutive winning seasons for the first time in the Dan Snyder era. You know, now, of course, that's going to leave some big shoes to fill. I don't anticipate they're going to have to fill those shoes before the draft, because a lot of the plan was already set in place. But there's big questions to come for the franchise once we get past the draft.
Just a quick follow-up there. Were you surprised then at all that they did not re-sign Garcon or Jackson? It's the first time ever that a team loses 1,000-yard receivers in the same free agency period.
Well, I think if Scott had remained in the building, I think that they would have made a harder push to re-sign Pierre Garcon, because Pierre Garcon became such a big part of setting the culture the way that they wanted to set it the last 2 years. So maybe they would have made a little bit of a more ardent push to try and keep Pierre Garcon. But there's no question that there was going to be turnover at the receiver position. They drafted Josh Doxson a year ago. Obviously, he went through the injury problems, but the feeling is that he could be maybe a poor man's Des Bryant going forward. They had a plan in place to kind of evolve and continue moving forward at the position with guys like Doxson and Jamison Crowder. I don't think that would have been much different. It's obviously going to affect the offense to some degree, but with the age of Garcon, with the age of Jackson, I mean, there was always a plan in place over the last couple of years to move on from those two. I just think there might have been a little bit more of a push to re-sign Garcon based on what he meant to the program if Scott had still been in the building.
Albert, let's stay in the NFC East. By now, many people have seen this video. It's Zeke Elliott being caught by TMZ. He was filmed pulling down a woman's shirt at a St. Patrick's Day celebration. Now, this doesn't exist in a vacuum, because he's also being investigated for domestic violence. So how concerned should the Cowboys be?
Well, it certainly, calls into question decision making, and the thing you got to remember, again, it's just like you said, like these things don't happen in a vacuum, and it's if you get a couple speeding tickets, you might be a little bit more careful on the highway. You might be a little closer to 65 miles an hour, if that happened over the last couple of months to you. And this is I think that kind of applies here, where Zeke Elliott, and look, we don't know what happened with Zeke Elliott in Columbus last summer, but that accusation's out there. And so, I think the way that any football team would look at it with its players is, if you've been involved in something, you want to be careful about doing anything that can call into question what happened in the past. And this is obviously another incident with a woman. So, in a vacuum, what happened, this St. Patrick's Day parade maybe wouldn't be that big a deal. But based on what there is in his past, and based on some of the knocks on him coming out of Ohio State, that the partying had become a little bit of an issue. You certainly have to, if you're the Cowboys, pull Zeke Elliott in and say, this is just a common sense thing. Like you have to be careful because you've got this reputation already, and so you don't want to feed into what people think of you. And obviously, I think what happened on St. Patrick's Day there, or at the St. Patrick's Day parade, certainly feeds into perception of what Zeke Elliott has been.
Albert Breer, really appreciate your time. And whatever's in that bag with the coffee behind you, we'll take a little bit. Looks like breakfast has arrived for the Breers.
So I don't think there's nothing in there. Nothing in there.
Oh, we're so disappointed. We're so disappointed. Albert Breer, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Jordan.
All right. So one thing that Albert said, it really, it was something I thought also, which is if this Zeke Elliott thing happens without any suspicion of domestic violence, I don't think we're talking about it today. And beyond that, 20 years ago, we don't see this happening at a St. Patrick's Day party. 20 years ago, there's not camera phones. Maybe this is a story that 100 people then go on and they tell someone and they tell someone, it becomes this big rumor. But I can't help but wonder, Jordan, do you think it was better to be a professional athlete 20 years ago, or is it better to be one today?
I hate to use the double-edged sword, but that is the, I think, perfect description. Because 20 years ago, obviously, you don't have as much money, but you also don't have the scrutiny of social media. You've heard a lot of athletes. We mentioned Charles Barkley earlier in the show. He said, if there was a camera phone when I was playing, who knows where I'd be today? And Michael Jordan said similar things. So I would say it's probably better now just because of the money and there's a little more financial stability, even in the NFL. But I think there is a point to be made that if you're playing in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s to an extent, there is less pressure from that regard.
Yeah, I still think it's better now, but, we forget that, people say that Zeke Elliott's 21, he should know better, and he should play big-time college football, and obviously is now a huge star in the NFL, but 21 to me is just not that old. It just doesn't seem like this is not a 31-year-old that we're talking about, or even beyond that, which I thought was just kind of interesting. This thing obviously, like I said, doesn't happen in a vacuum, but the
allegation out there really hurts him here.
It absolutely does. This shows a pattern potentially. And I also can't help but think that, this is the moment right now for Zeke Elliott. Depending on what this investigation turns up, his entire career could shift. He really, the way we talk about Zeke Elliott, depending on what happens with this domestic violence situation, and now we have this video of him pulling the woman's shirt down, we could be thinking about him and looking at him completely different off the field in just a matter of weeks.
And this should be a time when we're celebrating one of the great rookie years of anybody ever. Just in a phenomenal season, and yet we're talking about this now. You do wonder now how much that halo hangs over him moving forward as we go into spring, into training camp. It is a shame for him. I hope everything turns out okay with the allegation, because that is the real issue here.
Absolutely, and that's the one we should be paying attention to the most. Of course, turning to baseball. In November, talk about this feel-good story. Still feeling good about it. The Chicago Cubs won their first World Series since 1908. 5 months later, Sports Illustrated's Tom Verducci takes us deep inside the Chicago clubhouse in his new book, The Cubs Way. Here is an excerpt.
Anthony Rizzo broke out of a slump in the NLCS when he hit a home run with a bat borrowed from teammate Matt Caesar. The press ate up the story. The bat, as the story went, was identical to Rizzo's own model in size and weight, but was full of amazing karma. The story sounded great, but there was one catch to it. It was built on a white lie. Rizzo made a confession to me, but only after he made me promise it was off the record while the World Series was being played. I agreed. Caesar's bat was significantly smaller than his own, 1 inch shorter and 2 ounces lighter. Rizzo switched bats not for luck, but as a concession to losing strength and bat speed due to the length of the season. It allowed me to free up my hands and not have to use my body, he said, because at the end of the year I was so beat, I guess. In the beginning of the playoffs, I was missing fastballs. I kept asking myself, why am I missing these fastballs? My swing is good. It could be psychological, but I think not. But I think taking the extra inch off and lightening my bat, I started to get those pitches again. Rizzo played along with the crazy good luck bat story because he didn't want opponents to know that he was using a shorter, lighter bat. He knew that because of the way pitchers beat him early in the playoffs, that the scouting report on him said his bat was slow and that he could be beaten with fastballs. Meanwhile, with Caesar's smaller and lighter bat, he actually was much quicker to the ball. It was a secret he enjoyed for the final 10 postseason games, during which he hit .432 with Caesar's bat.
Manny Ramirez has taken his talents to Japan, but it comes at a cost, and a weird one at that. Manny's contract includes clauses such as optional practices and unlimited sushi, which got us thinking, what are some of the most ridiculous contract clauses of all time? When signing with Frankfurt, Congolese soccer player Ralph Christel Guillemine would made sure his wife's culinary curiosity was satisfied with a clause requiring the club to pay for all of her cooking classes. Yum. Houston Astros pitcher Roy Oswalt had his lifelong dream realized when he pitched his team into the World Series, and it fulfilled an agreement that earned him his own personal bulldozer. And finally, when signing with the Seahawks in 1993, self-noted apocalypticist Rick Meyer had a clause included in his contract that he would get paid under any circumstances, up to and including the end of the world. So Manny, enjoy the illustrious company and all that sushi. Those are some crazy contracts. Listen, I like the call for unlimited sushi. That's really good. I might not get the bang for the buck that Manny Ramirez is going to get out of that. I'm like one California roll and done. What would you put in a contract if you
Maggie,
had the sky's the limit?
I've been thinking about this, and for me, it's very simple. I need a half-court basketball hoop inside, nice wooden floor, a couple bleachers, a little soda dispenser, maybe a beer keg on the back.
Okay.
And I'm good to go, because that's all I need. I just need something simple.
You're a simple man.
That's all I need.
Just your own basketball court. You're a simple guy. What about scoreboard also?
Maybe a little scoreboard, and if you want to make it a full
JS?
court, yes, that's great. But I definitely need the hoop. Then I'm happy.
Pretty cool.
All right, what about you?
Okay, for me, I thought about this quite a bit too. I want use of the private jet. I want to be wearing PJs on the PJ. That's really my goal. I want it to be all on the company's dime. I can fly around wherever I go. Give me the private jet. I'm not asking for a lot. I assume I'm the franchise player at this point. Just give me the jet.
I think other options, chef.
Chef would be great.
Masseuse.
was our showrunner Ben wants the full-time masseuse.
Those would be superb options as well. But I think the private jet, or as I mentioned before this segment, a helicopter could be really good, or a little regional action.
No way. Helicopter, I'm too nervous for something like that. Jordan Schultz, thank you for being here. Can we give it up? Round of applause for Jordan, everyone in the studio. They're throwing rotten fruit. No, you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching SI Now. We're back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Of course, you can catch all the latest sports news on SI.com and give us a follow on Twitter at SI Now Live. See you tomorrow. Tournament starts for real tomorrow. That's wild.